Hi, I'm Fernanda. Before I continue, please like and subscribe. One click from you means more stories can be shared. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and make a difference. Let's begin. For as long as I can remember, my family's annual 4th of July barbecue was sacred. My dad, Richard Montgomery, made sure everyone knew it was non-negotiable family time. Every year, without fail, we'd gather at my parents' lakeside property for the weekend. Cousins, aunts, uncles, friends of the family. At least 40 people crammed onto that deck overlooking the water. Nanda, my mom called from the kitchen as I helped chop vegetables. Can you take these out to your father? He's probably burning those burgers again. I grabbed the platter and headed toward the sliding glass doors when my phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend, Tyler. How's family prison camp going? He wrote. I smiled and typed back quickly. Same as always. Dad's playing grill master, Mom's micromanaging everyone, Aunt Patty's already tipsy. When I stepped outside, Dad was holding court, spatula in hand, telling his favorite college football story for what must have been the 1,000th time. My brother Jake rolled his eyes at me from across the deck. There's my girl, Dad boomed when he spotted me. Just in time to witness greatness on the grill. Sure, Dad, I said, setting down the vegetables. Mom says you're probably burning the burgers. Your mother has no faith in my culinary talents, he said, flipping a patty that was definitely charred on one side. But one day, you'll appreciate these skills. Family traditions are what keep us together. If you say so, I muttered. After dinner, everyone gathered for the traditional family photos. Dad insisted on at least 20 different combinations. Siblings together, cousins together, generations together. It took forever. Stand up straight, Fernanda, Dad directed. This is for the family album. Later that night, after most guests had gone home, Dad cornered me on the porch. So, what's the plan after graduation? You know the family business has a spot for you? Marketing department could use some fresh blood. I'd heard this speech before. Montgomery Investments was Dad's pride and joy, a financial advising firm he'd built from scratch. My brother Jake already worked there, following dutifully in Dad's footsteps. I'm not sure, Dad. I've got some interviews lined up in Chicago. His face fell immediately. Chicago? That's 4 hours away. The whole point of going to state was so you could come back home after. I never said that was my plan. Well, it should be, he insisted. Family sticks together. That's how the Montgomerys have always done things. Maybe I want to do things differently. Dad's face hardened. You're just being rebellious. You'll come around. That conversation played in my mind for months afterward. When I landed a marketing job in Chicago with Horizon Media, Dad barely congratulated me. When I found my apartment, he questioned why I'd waste money renting when I could live at home and commute. As the next 4th of July approached, Mom called to confirm I'd be attending the annual barbecue. Everyone's expecting you, honey. Your cousins are bringing their kids this year. I looked at my calendar. I'd planned a weekend trip with my new friends from work. Our first real chance to bond outside the office. Actually, Mom, I might not make it this year. There's this thing with work friends. Fernanda Montgomery, this is non-negotiable. Your father would be devastated. I sighed. Let me talk to him. When Dad called back an hour later, I braced myself for the guilt trip. Your mother says you're thinking of skipping the barbecue, he said, his tone already disappointed. Dad, I've made plans with friends. It's important for networking. More important than family traditions? Than your own family? I stayed silent, frustrated by the manipulation. After a long pause, he said something that shocked me. You know what? Fine. Traditions are for parents anyway. You can skip this year. We'll manage without you. Really? I couldn't believe he was letting me off so easily. Sure. You're an adult now. Make your choices. Just don't expect everyone to understand. I felt both relieved and vaguely uneasy. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate it. I'll tell your mother you have more important things to do. After we hung up, my roommate Olivia looked at me questioningly. Everything okay? You look confused. My dad just told me I could skip our family tradition. That's unprecedented. Isn't that good? She asked. I guess. It just doesn't feel right. Maybe he's finally respecting your independence, Olivia suggested. I nodded, trying to believe it. The weekend of the 4th, my social media filled with photos from the family barbecue. Everyone seemed to be having the usual great time. Dad posted a family photo with the caption, "Missing one this year, but traditions continue." It stung a little, but I enjoyed my trip with friends. Then the texts started coming in from extended family. "Hey, you okay? Heard about what happened?" my cousin Megan wrote. "What do you mean?" I replied. "With your dad's speech? About how disappointed he was?" My stomach dropped. What speech? At the barbecue. He made this whole toast about family loyalty and how some people choose to abandon traditions. I called my brother Jake immediately. "What did Dad say at the barbecue?" I demanded when he answered. Jake hesitated. "You don't want to know, Nanda. Tell me." "He made this whole dramatic speech about how you're rejecting the family. Said you think you're too good for us now that you're in Chicago. He even got Mom crying." He what? It was bad. Aunt Patty tried to defend you, but Dad shut her down. Said you've changed and not for the better. My hands shook with anger. He told me it was fine to miss it. He literally said, "Traditions are for parents. You can skip this year." Well, he definitely didn't present it that way to everyone else, Jake said. According to him, you basically told the family to go to hell. I hung up and immediately called my dad. He didn't answer. I texted him. "I heard about your speech. We need to talk." 3 hours later, he finally called back, acting completely innocent. "What speech?" "I just mentioned you couldn't make it." "That's not what I heard, Dad. You made me sound like I abandoned the family." "I simply expressed my disappointment. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe examine why." "You told me it was okay to skip. You said, 'Traditions are for parents. You can skip this year.'" "Well, actions have consequences, Fernanda. The family noticed your absence." I realized then that this was his game. He'd set me up to look bad while appearing magnanimous. This wasn't the first time he'd manipulated situations to control the narrative, but it was the most blatant. You know what, Dad? You're right. Actions do have consequences. That was the beginning of my plan. If Dad wanted to play games, I could play too. The next month, Mom called about my cousin Ellie's wedding. "You're coming, right? Your father's giving a toast as the family patriarch?" "Wouldn't miss it," I said sweetly. Before the wedding, I had coffee with Ellie and told her exactly what had happened with the 4th of July barbecue. "Your dad did that?" she asked, shocked. "That's so manipulative." "It's not the first time," I admitted. "He's always controlled the family narrative." "Well, he's not doing that at my wedding," Ellie declared. "I'll make sure of it." At the reception, Dad stood to give his toast, glass raised high. "Family is everything," he began. "The Montgomerys understand loyalty better than most." Ellie clinked her glass, interrupting him. "Before Uncle Richard continues, I'd like to say something. Family is everything, which is why honesty matters. I won't let anyone use my wedding to manipulate others or spread false narratives." Dad's face went pale. He looked directly at me, and I raised my glass slightly, holding his gaze. After the wedding, he confronted me in the parking lot. "You turned Ellie against me." "I told her the truth, Dad. That's all. This isn't how family behaves. You might want to remember that yourself." My plan continued with Uncle Tom the following week. I called him about a family reunion photo album I was putting together. "Hey, Uncle Tom, remember when you were considering that job in Seattle? What happened with that?" He sighed heavily. "Your father happened. He convinced me it would be a mistake to move the family that far. Said it would devastate your aunt. But Aunt Carol seems so adventurous. Was she really against it?" "That's the thing. When I finally talked to her about it, she was excited about the possibility. But by then, I'd already declined." "Did Dad ever tell you he supported the idea?" Uncle Tom was quiet for a moment. "Actually, yeah. A few years later, he mentioned how disappointed he was that I didn't take that opportunity. made it sound like he'd encouraged me to go for it. Interesting, I said. That doesn't match what you just told me. Huh. I never connected those dots before. My campaign continued quietly. I started having regular conversations with family members, one-on-one. I never accused Dad directly, but asked innocent questions. Did Dad ever tell you one thing and then claim he said something different? Has Dad ever made you feel guilty for making your own choices? Remember when Dad said that thing about Aunt Patty's business? Wasn't that strange? Slowly, people began comparing notes. Stories emerged. My Uncle Tom recalled how Dad had discouraged him from taking a job opportunity, then later claimed he'd been supportive all along. Cousin Rachel remembered how Dad had told different family members conflicting stories about a family property dispute. By Thanksgiving, there was a subtle shift in the family dynamic. Dad still held court, but people exchanged glances during his pronouncements. His stories weren't met with the same unquestioning acceptance. When he tried to dictate the seating arrangement, Aunt Patty gently but firmly said, "Actually, Richard, we already worked it out." His face registered surprise, then annoyance. The real moment came at Christmas. Dad had always controlled the gift exchange, insisting everyone follow his elaborate rules. This year, Mom quietly suggested a different approach. "I thought we might try something new this year." Dad immediately objected. "We've always done it my way." "Yes, but several people mentioned they'd prefer something simpler," Mom replied. "Who said that?" Dad demanded. The room fell silent. Then my brother Jake spoke up. "I did, Dad. And so did Aunt Patty and Uncle Tom. We talked about it." "You talked about changing our traditions without me? The way you talked about Fernanda missing the 4th of July barbecue without telling her side?" Jake countered. Dad's face flushed. "That was different." "How?" I asked innocently. He looked around the room, suddenly realizing he didn't have the automatic support he was used to. "Fine. Do whatever you want." He stormed out of the room. Later, he found me alone in the kitchen. "I know what you've been doing," he said, his voice low. "Turning the family against me." "I haven't said anything untrue, Dad. You've been undermining me." "No, I've been helping people see your manipulation. There's a difference. I've only ever tried to keep this family together." "By controlling everyone? By punishing anyone who doesn't follow your rules? You have no idea what it takes to maintain family traditions." "Maybe traditions shouldn't require manipulation to survive." Dad fell silent, his anger seeming to deflate slightly. "I'm your father. You owe me respect." "Respect is earned, Dad, and it requires honesty." Over the following months, Dad's position as the unquestioned family authority continued to erode. People started making decisions without consulting him. Family gatherings became more collaborative. When he tried his old tactics, someone would gently but firmly call him out. Aunt Patty called me one evening in March. "You wouldn't believe what happened today," she said, barely containing her laughter. "What?" "Your dad called to convince me to host Easter at my place instead of Carol's. Said Carol had told him she was overwhelmed and wanted to back out but was too embarrassed to say so." "Let me guess. That wasn't true?" "Not even close. I called Carol while he was still on the other line. Put her on speaker. She had no idea what I was talking about. You should have heard your dad backpedaling." "What did he say?" I asked, smiling despite myself. "He tried to claim he'd misunderstood their conversation. Carol just said, 'Richard, we never had a conversation about Easter.' It was priceless." "Did he apologize?" "No, but he changed the subject real quick. The old Richard would have somehow made us feel like we were in the wrong for catching him. But now, he knew we weren't buying it." As the next 4th of July approached, Mom called me. "We're doing the barbecue differently this year," she said. "More potluck style, everyone contributing. Your father's adjusting." "Will he be okay with that?" Mom sighed. "He doesn't really have a choice. The family has spoken." When I arrived at the barbecue, Dad was noticeably subdued. He still manned the grill, but without the usual performative flair. During dinner, he clinked his glass for attention. "I've been thinking a lot about traditions lately," he began awkwardly. about why we have them and how they should evolve. I realize I may have been rigid in my approach. My eyes widened in surprise. Particularly with you, Fernanda, he continued. Last year, when you couldn't make it, I didn't handle it well. I said one thing to you and another to everyone else. That wasn't right. The table fell silent. Dad Montgomery never admitted being wrong. I'm trying to do better, he finished, looking uncomfortable. After dinner, he approached me on the dock. I know what you did, he said quietly, getting everyone to compare notes about me. I started to object, but he held up his hand. It was clever, effective. He looked out over the water. I never thought my own tactics would be used against me. They weren't tactics, Dad, just honesty. He nodded slowly. I'm not going to apologize again. I didn't expect you to. But I will say this. You've changed the family dynamic permanently. I'm not sure if that's good or bad yet. I shrugged. Maybe it's just different. Maybe that's okay. Dad turned to look at me. Really look at me. Perhaps for the first time seeing me as my own person rather than an extension of himself. You're a lot like me, you know. More than your brother. I'm nothing like you, I said automatically. He smiled slightly. That's what I would say too. As I watched him walk back toward the house, I realized the victory wasn't about making him grovel or destroying his position in the family. It was about creating space for honesty, for genuine connection rather than controlled performance. Dad would never fully change. But the family had changed around him, creating boundaries he now had to respect. His words, "Traditions are for parents, you can skip this year," had backfired spectacularly, forcing a reckoning he never anticipated. And honestly, I think he needed it. We all did. That evening, as fireworks exploded overhead, my cousin Megan sat beside me. The family feels different now, she observed. Better, I think. I nodded. It's like we can all breathe. Do you think your dad will ever fully understand what happened? That's a good question. When someone has controlled the narrative for so long, can they ever truly see how their actions affected others? If you discovered someone was manipulating your family's perceptions, would you confront them directly or take my approach?